She produced the film on his life. He directed her when she acted as his mother. Now, if that sounds a bit like gobbledygook, don't worry. It's only a hint of the complex web of connections that bind the two together. This father-daughter relationship is not just special, it's actually unique. And here to talk about it are the two themselves, Pooja and Mahesh Bhatt. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
I want to start with the film you made together in 1998, Zakham. Pooja was the producer, Mahesh was the director. It's the story of your Muslim grandmother, her love for the man whose children she had but couldn't marry, and your own father's troubled childhood. Whose idea was it to make this very personal film?
Well, who else but him?
It was mine. I felt that I wanted to hang the gloves after having made more than 50 films, and I felt that after having a kind of rather phase of indifferent films and where my creative career hit the rock bottom, I found that a graceful exit was necessary, and there was the audience which was feeling disappointed. They did not see the Mahesh Bhatt that they had loved in Arth Saransh Janam. And I found that I was right, because somewhere within me the need to make a film on this area of my life, which was my childhood, was not really made by me, so I went ahead and did that.
He talks of it as if it was a deliberately chosen swan song. But in a sense, the movie is more than that. It's also a public acclaiming of the fact that he's half Muslim. It's a sort of public declaration, isn't it?
It is, and in fact, within the family, when my grandmother died, there were people who kind of said, no, you can't bury her. You know, what will the rest of the world say? And we found it amazing that we're making a movie about this, and people think that it happens in the rest of India to other people, but it was happening within our own family.
So it was both an expiation of something that he wanted to do, but it was also a public telling. It was something that you thought millions would relate to.
Absolutely. I think he needed to kind of give her that. I think she wanted to be buried. That was what her dream was.
You once said of your mother, she was the only person I was playing to all these years. All my success, all my victories were addressed to her. You adored her.
I think I've not been able to replace that woman. And I feel, you know, as a child, I always wanted to make her proud, because she felt that her existence, because she was not married to my father, and so in that term, it was a sinful relationship. And I could see that that feeling of sin had kind of seeped into her very marrow of her bones. And only when I carved out a place for myself in the sun, that she said to me, now I can go with my head held high and tell the world that I'm Mahesh Bhatt's mother, because that is one thing that nobody can deny me.
Your success gave her a sense of legitimacy.
Yeah, a sense of legitimacy, because she said that this is one relationship that no power in the world can say that it's not a legitimate relationship, because you're the flesh of my flesh, you're born of me. So I think that was the sense of...
all her life she lived with a very personal pain, the pain of knowing that the only reason she couldn't marry the man she loved, whose children she'd had, was because she was Muslim. As her son, as a child, how difficult was it for you to cope with that?
Very difficult. I hated my father. My growing days, my teenage, and way into the 30s. It's only after I achieved success, I began to see that, you know, you can't just reduce human beings to black and white. That there was a side to him. He had a personal story.
But the child Mahesh hated his father.
Hated him. He did not like what happened to this beautiful Shia woman who was gorgeous, and somehow the only thing I remember of my mother is waiting for this father of mine to come. And he would come, and I remember when he used to come, he used to not take off his shoes off, because he was always in a hurry to go away. And we were told to tell our neighbors, when they used to ask us, where is your father? And we were tutored to say, shooting pe gaye hain.
So there was always a lie you had to tell to the world to account for the fact that daddy wasn't there.
Yeah, and then I discovered that the world manipulates you from what you hide. And that's when I learned very young that if you reveal it all, then they have no control over you.
There's a real sense to an outsider in which your own childhood has certain similarities, almost parallel lines to Mahesh's. For instance, your parents separated when you were 9, and you were brought up primarily by your mother. Did she also become, in a way, the center of your existence as a child?
Well, my parents separated in terms of geography, but they never separated. I mean, I'm one of those people who've had the privilege of a absolutely boringly normal childhood in that capacity. I mean, people look for trauma, there isn't any, and there wasn't any. because I was just glad
I know,
that...
I don't mean trauma, but in a
No,
sense,
no, I
did
know.
Mummy become the center of your existence
Well, she
because
still
Daddy
is.
wasn't always there?
No, but she still is to a large extent, and that has nothing to do with him leaving or not leaving. I mean, she's somebody who I live with. I don't think we'd be able to live together, the two of us. I mean, we adore each other,
Can't
but
stand her.
we can't take a flight to Delhi together. I mean, it's a nightmare. So living under the same roof would be quite difficult, and I'd always live with my mother forever and ever and ever. I mean, I really enjoy living with
Your
her.
friend said that you were a very emotional child, that you would leave little notes in your lunchbox telling Mummy how much you loved her.
Yeah, I used to write them love notes all the time.
She never wrote to me.
I wrote you a couple of times, but more to my mother. I just thought she was, you know, very
I
very
remember the
dignified
first interview she did for Society. She said, I love Mahesh Bhatt. Was the first interview she did.
Was that the first time you heard those words?
Yeah, the first time. She never said that to me. She never left notes. She declared it on the rooftop.
You know, you were very honest with Pooja when your marriage broke up. You actually sat down and explained to her even though she was a child. But how did you actually tell your daughter that I'm going to walk out of your mother's life?
He woke me up at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
He came home, I was
Yeah.
asleep, and he woke me up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he was singing some songs before that, and he was sitting on the floor. I remember I was lying in bed, and he shook me awake, and he said that, Pooja, I want to be the first one to know, but I'm having an affair with this woman called Soni, and I'm going to marry her. And I said, okay, because I said, are you going to marry her? And he said, yeah, because he's just the kind of person who doesn't believe. If he has a relationship, he takes it all the way. I mean, he's not the kind of man who's had a relationship with a woman and not kind of given her the legitimities that
Did you
relationship
really
might require.
understand when you said okay, or were you perplexed, or were you inside very angry?
No, I wasn't angry because I knew that my parents, I mean, they've been together for what, 40 years now. I mean, they've known each other since my mother was 11 or 12 and he was 14 or 15.
Yeah, I was 14 years old.
And then it came to a point in their life where they both just were different people at that phase, and he wanted more and she wanted more, and for whatever it was, that's their problem. And I think that you cannot, you know, you expect your parents to let you do with your life what you want. And then you start telling them to stick together because you don't want kids in school to question you. That's really warped, I
But
think.
at
I mean,
the age of 9, you were mature enough to understand?
yeah,
I remember
I
her
was.
face,
I
she
mean,
listened. She listened. And I remember as a child, I used to always wonder, why do people talk down to me? They talk to me, this baby talks, I said, kid, I understand what's going on. In fact, I understand the silences much more. And what you hide from me, I understand even more. That's why I was always interested to find out what happens in the home when the guests have gone. Because that's when the real house begins to reveal itself. So I knew this. So I felt that having experienced this, I could see that in her eyes she was an intelligent girl. And I couldn't lie to the flesh of my flesh and pretend to be somebody that I was not. I would rather reveal to her what I really was.
Was there something else also? It's not just a question of not lying. Were you also conscious of the parallels in your two childhoods and also determined not to lose your daughter in a way in which, for a while at least, your father had lost his son?
But you know, I think you can hardly compare the two, because my
completely
father never spoke to me, because there was a silence. There was no relationship between me and my father. We started talking when we were very, very
And you began
poor.
speaking to
When she
Pooja
was-
through letters when
Yeah.
she was just 5 hours old. But
Yes,
innocent.
my first letter. I was drunk. I had 3 bottles of beer. I was lying on the parapet of my building looking at the stars, and I wrote this letter to her. And I remember what I wrote to her: be truthful and be fearless, because you're part of divinity.
But were
and
you
not a
doing this
sin.
because, in a sense, your father never spoke to you and you wanted to establish a contact and a communication from the very beginning?
I wanted to begin. I was the first person who wanted to begin a dialogue with this girl, and I wanted to kind of. I was keeping the perspective of history. Way back, I was perhaps aware that this is going to be an important document that the world is going to discover someday.
Pooja, people who know the two of you say that the amazing thing about Mahesh and Pooja is not that they're just father and daughter, but their relationship is that of mature friends, adults who understand each other. Would you disagree with that?
No, I agree with that. I think that he's more of a friend to me than I am to him. I think that if anyone has been more fair in his relationship, it's been him to me and my mother to me. You know, once I remember telling him, I said, that's not fair. And he said, really? I want to see if you're as fair with your children. And that really got me thinking. And I just hope that I'm 10% as fair with my children, if I ever have them, as he and my mother have been.
You went through a pretty unique experience in Zakam. Not only did you act as your own grandmother, but you also acted as your father's mother, and the child in the film was in fact your father.
Yeah.
That strange experience, did it give you an insight into Mahesh?
Oh,
And perhaps-
completely. For the first time in my life, I was watching your life being played out in front of me by that brilliant boy, Kunal. I mean, if there's an actor in the country, it's him. And I was envious because the two of you had this great rapport. You used to look at that child from across the room and gesture, and he just understood. And he would recreate this kind of you know, this part of his life. And I would look at it, and I remember one day in lunch break telling him, I said, "You were really lonely when you were young." And he said, "Yeah." And I felt like, you know, I just wanted to go and give him a hug. And I realized that
what about
he
something
was
else?
just forced to be a grown-up from the time he was little.
At that moment when you were understanding the traumatic childhood that your father went through, did you also in reverse understand that despite the fact your parents had separated, in comparison yours was a very lucky childhood because you didn't have to suffer the same way?
I always thought mine was a lucky childhood. Even before I knew about other people or whatever, I just thought I had a privileged childhood. I mean, how many people have their fathers write letters to them 5 hours after they were born?
So Zakham, in a
and
sense,
continue to write letters to them at the age of 31.
But Karan,
you
let
know?
me interrupt. You know, I think the trauma is something which I'm very grateful, because that trauma has made me what I am. That's a defining pain of my life. And I think...
you think of it as a trial by fire, an Agni Pariksha?
I think that has in a way shaped me and made me what I am. I perhaps, if you take away that living wound from my life, and I would be empty. And I think
Yeah,
that makes me...
You know,
I think all of us, I mean, I think we are what we are because of all the crises that we probably have been through, and I think that's how we kind of dealt with that crisis. It's made us who we are.
you know, crisis is an interesting word. The world often thinks that Pooja Bhatt went through several love affair crises, particularly when she was young. There's a gorgeous story that when there was a particular problem with one of your boyfriends and it was splashed all over the papers,
Yeah.
your father turned around and said to you, "What you need is not another relationship with a man, you need a relationship with yourself."
Yeah, that's true. He said that to me. I mean, I was 15 when I had a disastrous relationship, and I was 30 when I had my second disastrous one. And I think my first and my last one, I'm going to keep it at that. But I remember him telling me the first time around, when there was a magazine who had this story, and I got all worried because I wasn't part of movies at that point. And he came to me and he said, "I'm giving you this book," and he gave me this book of UGs, and he said, "The more you hide things from people, the more they're going to try and find out. Don't give them the privilege. Just hang it all out. Me and your mother know what you do, and we're fine with it. So do not ever get intimidated by something or by somebody who tries to say, 'But we know this about you,' or 'We know that about you.'" And then again, at the age of 13, I realized that all my life, I have the capacity to kind of invest so much in relationships, but I didn't do the same with my work. And for the first time, I wake up every morning, and I just love that. And I think that, yeah, he's absolutely right. And for the first time, I'm having this wonderful relationship with myself.
Was it easy to let your daughter be herself and free? And to tell her, don't worry what the world thinks?
Who the hell am I to let her be? It's you know, it's very, it is, the whole, who the hell am I to give her the freedom? She is born free, I put her in a cage, and then I want her to applaud her for giving something which she is entitled to by her mere birth as a human being. I feel that we are all in a society responsible for children to a particular point, that I can't pretend to her that I am an embodiment of those values when I have violated every law in the book. How can I put myself up?
That's the interesting point. What about the opposite? As your father says, he's violated every law in the book. And in a sense, you witnessed his wayward years. Rajneesh, drugs, affairs, divorce. Is it easy to be adult-like in your response when the person you're responding to happens to be your father?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the thing is that it's, you know, he's never held a cigarette in his hand and said, "Don't smoke." You know, I mean, so it's never been a relationship of, "I'm going to tell you what to do." And, you know, even with my mother and him, I mean, it wasn't good for him to do and not good for my mother to do.
But there was never a moment when you said to yourself, "Oh, I wish Daddy wouldn't do this"?
No, I mean, we've had yelling fights, but we kind of yell at each other.
She never used the breakup with my first wife
Yeah.
as you know, as a whip to go after me. And I think that
There was
shows-
never any emotional blackmail.
Never.
No, there
The
wasn't.
only time she tried to do it was last time, and you know, remember we were having a fight, she said, "And you went away." She said to me, I said, "Come off it." You got that line.
That was very manipulative.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And that
I know,
line
and I realized the minute I said
conviction.
that
lacked
was
conviction.
terrible.
I said, "Come on,
Oh
Pooja,
God, I'm so embarrassed.
You don't mean that line." You know? She tried something which she threw a joker from the pack which
Yeah,
she had
that's
never
true,
done,
because, you know,
and it did not
yeah,
work.
It didn't work, and I realized that, you know, because you cannot go through your life blaming your parents or a silly boyfriend for anything that you become or whatever you choose to be. Thank God for the idiots I've met in my life. I wouldn't be directing my first film at the age of 31. Thank God for all those things. I mean, honestly, so it's too easy to go through life with baggage of hate and blaming somebody, whether it's your father, your mother, a boyfriend, or anybody else. You know, it's too simple. So I choose to not use that escape route in my life anymore. I'm not
Let's
going to.
take a break at that point.
Okay.
I want to come back in part 2 and talk to the two of you, not about your amazing relationship with each other, but a little bit about each of you individually. We'll be back in a moment's time. Don't go away. Welcome back. My guests are the unique father and daughter, Mahesh and Pooja Bhatt. Let's talk a little about each of you. Pooja, your father once said of himself, I'm a calculating person. I want success, I want achievement. All my relationships are based on need. Is he really as self-centered as that?
He's not self-centered. I mean, he's pretty clear about the fact that he wants to be successful, and it's important to him that everybody around him, in terms of, he tells me, if you're not successful, you're not going to be invited to kind of be on the show today. At the end of the day, you have to be successful if you like to fly business class. If you like those things that you like, you have to be successful. That's the only language people understand, and I agree with him, because that's the only thing that really works here is success, I mean, in this world today.
So the image that people have that Mahesh's world revolves around Mahesh is in fact an exaggeration he often plays up to himself.
Yeah, I think his world really revolves around other people's worlds. I mean, he's constantly, if he's successful, he wants to use that success to empower other people in any capacity. I think today you enjoy going to, Nagaland a lot more than you probably enjoyed making any of your movies.
Yeah, because that's the new phase of my life. Because I feel that there's up till a point you can look for personal success. After that, whatever you are has to translate into the assets of others. Unless you can kind of distribute your own achievements into small kind of packets of happiness or others, it means nothing. And that also you're doing for your own sense of gratification. I've never given anything to anybody without getting something back, and that's the most important thing which I know.
On the other hand, Pooja is a very open, unhypocritical person. She does what she wants, and she often doesn't care what the world says about it. Do you think sometimes, perhaps unwittingly, she ends up as her own worst enemy?
Well, I think I'm not exactly sure whether that is the right definition of Pooja. That may be her PR job.
Not my PR job. I think you're more open than I am.
I think she is. She does give a damn about the world, and I feel that she does kind of feel a little intimidated when the world kind of slots her the way it does.
She's a vulnerable person underneath this exterior.
I am vulnerable. I'm not just exterior. I'm very vulnerable. I'm sensitive and vulnerable. I don't try to hide that. I think that's my...
She still gives a damn about what the world
Let me
thinks.
quote to you something that you said to the newspapers when one of your boyfriend episodes, as your father calls them, was splashed across the pages. You said, why should I conceal my relationships with men? After all, they aren't that important in my life. I'm more important. Are you saying to me that that defiance is actually not the real Pooja? Inside, you were hurting.
Well, at that point I was hurting because I thought it was just too easy for people to kind of say, oh, you've had 15 relationships and you deserve it, in that capacity. But I think that, unfortunately for me, I think that I did give my relationships a lot more focus than I ever gave my work. And I think that was probably, that's where I was my worst enemy. But in that regard, I mean, I think my relationships or my work has never really defined me completely.
He says that, in fact, the truth is that Pooja is a lot more conservative than people think, and actually, he adds, she's a prude.
Yeah, I might be. I mean, I am. I mean, I believe in love, and I want to have babies, and I want to be married, and I want that house on the beach, so I'm conservative in that. I mean, I want what every girl wants in that respect,
She still wants to sail to that port where people live happily
ever after. I mean, I could write little notes.
She's a romantic?
I'm a romantic. When I was 7.
I think is beginning to wake up that fairy tales do not come true, but she's doing her very best to hold on to it. And I hate...
Are you doing your best to wake her up?
I'm doing my best to destroy that fairy tale so that she can really come to terms that this is the only life you have, and I do not believe in afterlife, so you better get everything right in this life, live vigorously, live on your own terms, because this is the only life. That's what I'm trying to very subtly kind of slip into her without imposing myself on her.
The world is often intrigued by your father. They see him as a very open person, someone who readily talks about himself, and yet people always feel that they don't fully understand Mahesh Bhatt. Is there a secret core that he never reveals, the inner self that remains just private?
No, I think that he's...
What you see is what you get.
What you see is what you get. There's no public and private Mahesh Bhatt in that respect. But he he also is very conservative. I mean, you talk about me being a prude. You're a prude too. You're probably a bigger prude than I am.
I never said
in that capacity.
I am traditional
No,
in the
people
true sense.
assume that just because he can sit here and talk to me about my boyfriends and talk to me about whether it's being married, I mean, having children out of wedlock or whether it's pregnancy or whatever, he's a kind of man who has no morals in that respect. I mean, you know, so I think that that's really, it's too easy to dismiss him as being mad. Half the journalists who call him and say, we want a quote from you, don't even get what he's saying half the time. It's just, we want something explosive, let's talk to Mahesh Bhatt. But I think that if you just
So in fact,
pause
he's
and
a
listen to
liberal
what he was
person,
saying,
but like
he's
liberal
liberal.
people, he has
He's
a very
fair.
rigid moral code that he lives by.
yeah.
I have a marriage system, and I feel that I'm more traditional than the so-called self-proclaimed traditionalist.
I mean,
I may not go for Rakhi to my sister's house, but yet but if she's in crisis, I will be the first man to sell everything I have to come to her help. But I don't demonstrate and make a kind of a ceremony out of it.
You know, many people have this other image of you, that you're a driven personality, constantly searching, constantly seeking. Now that you're in your 60s, do you have a better understanding of what it is that you're looking for?
I get my age right, I'm 54. Okay, I am 54, and I still have the same feeling that I woke up with when I was 8 or 9. This feeling that I have a far, far, far way to go, long way to go. And this continuous feeling...
You mean the sort of
my
Robert
heart.
Frost line, the woods are silent, dark and deep?
I don't have any promises to keep. I have this. I have this in my DNA. This continuous yearning to go on. I'm driven, and it's no destination that I'm trying to reach. But I'm not in awe of my own intellect. I am not the first member of my own fan club. I know that I'm much to be proud of what I've achieved. Yet, when I compare to where I want to get, I haven't even scratched my
But you
surface.
also believe that life is an unending journey, and you have to keep moving one foot at a time forward.
Yes, I need.
But you don't know where you're going, though.
I think at the moment I know I'm going fast
He
nowhere.
used to wear a
because-
t-shirt when I was younger. Yuji gave it to him and said, don't follow me, I'm lost too. And that's the way it is with him.
Yeah, I'm
He
not.
says, I can
I'm
give you a
stumbling,
roadmap
fumbling person.
and say, these are the pitfalls, but I'm not here to show you the way. You have to go and
I'm a
lead it.
stumbling,
You need to
fumbling
rely
person,
on
He
I'm
says
not.
a
yourself.
very interesting thing about you. He says ever since Pooja became a producer, she's rediscovered traditional values.
What is that supposed to
You mean you
mean?
get up in the morning at 7 o'clock,
Yeah,
and at
I
6
just,
o'clock,
I
and you come
genuinely
to
love
7,
it. I love it. I
and you
just love
want people to
producing.
deliver as per the promise.
I do. Because I feel
She's
like for
become
the
a boss.
first time, yeah, I mean, I didn't think I'd really achieve anything before I turned producer with Tamanna. So for the first time, I feel a sense of, you know, that I'm doing something of a certain value. And it's great to wake up at 6:30 and go to work. And like, you know, earlier it was just, you know, you're an actress, you're getting up, you're going there, things happen. to
Now
you.
there is a
Now you
purpose
make
to
them
it all.
happen, absolutely.
And that sense of purpose fulfills you.
Yeah, it does. It does more than any relationship has, and it's a fact. When I saw my hoarding of Jism the first time, a hoarding that everyone told me will not work, it's a black hoarding, that gave me more satisfaction than any relationship in my life had ever given me.
Pooja and Mahesh, a pleasure getting to know the two of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.